Hi, Fatima. This is Amy from Irigenics, and this is your Ancestral Eye reading. So I'm starting you here at the Irigenics website, irigenics.com, because there's a lot of good resource materials in here for you. And that starts with this Start Here tab, where there is an Ancestral Eye image gallery. And this is where you can find a number of different photographs I've taken of people's eyes that are from all different colored eyes, all different kinds of structures. Also, if you get in here, you can get into my Ancestors Within book series, including the activity guides and the journals. And I believe we have at least one more activity guide coming out this year. So keep an eye on that. As you watch the video each time and time again, you'll find that there are new things going on in the gallery and in the book area. Also, speaking of things that kind of update and are new, there's a resource and freebie tab here. And in here, there's how to make a timeline of your family history, how to make a treasure map of your ancestral clues, how to make your own genogram. There's some meditations, visualizations. There's a link into the 7 ways to meet your 7 ways to meet your ancestors today, kind of an intro course with like 21 pages where you can create interactive experiences with your ancestors. You'll find all of that inside the resource and freebie tab. And again, that's something that I update on a pretty regular basis. So whenever you come in, there may be some new things in there. As you scroll down the website and come down here past this eye, you'll find this line, take the quiz and discover your ancestral gifts. This is a quiz I put together at the start of COVID when I thought, oh, we are not going to be able to take people's eye photos. And so you just answer like 8 or 10 questions. And, you can even look in the mirror and be like, okay, what color is my eye? What kind of marks do I have? So if you run into someone who says, oh gosh, I wish I could have done that eye thing you did, they can at least come in here and start with their eye quiz. I'm going to talk a little bit about your intuitive type during the video tonight, and also I will for a bit in your My iMag. But this quiz actually gives you a 6-page PDF handout, which is much more detailed, and it's really pretty accurate for just answering your own questions. It's really based on eye structure, which is where you find what's your intuitive hookup, but also what is your energetic interfacing? How does your energy interface with other people? And so it's kind of a cool handout kind of thing to do. So another part of the reason I like to come down here is because my web designer is always on the hunt for a iPhoto that doesn't have any images in it. And I'm like, yeah, good luck with that. But you'll find that there's images in here, and there's images just like there are in all eyes. Now, this is a photo she grabbed off of Shutterstock or Deposit Photos or one of those websites. So obviously they altered it by putting in this kind of rainbow filter across it. But nonetheless, it's very accurate for how images show up in the eyes. Just like somebody colored with a colored pencil, and we wish they would have sharpened it. And so as you look through here, you see those who look like they were drawn with a number 2 pencil, and you wish they would have sharpened it. But here's like a whole family, and this would be time-wise, I would say this would be early 1900s, because this is when they were wearing like black stockings, particularly like in cold weather areas where girls would wear a dress that was a little bit longer, kind of Laura Ingalls Wilder time with the black stockings kind of thing. And here I would say it's a child or a baby. Up here you've got like a snapshot of maybe like a Marine or a Navy guy. There's the white hat on, and hats are a big thing in ancestral images. It's just because that's who they were at their time. In those times, they wore hats, but also the hats tell us a little bit maybe about their distinction, their careers, maybe what kind of economic level they were at. Now here you've got a gal who has one of those white crocheted collars, and she's got her hands here in front of her, and she's got her hair pulled up in a bob or up in a little bun kind of thing. You've got this guy down here who's got a very full white beard, who's got a bit of a shiny forehead, but there's images all over, some more clear than others, some full length where you're seeing kind of the whole person. Here you see this gal from the right side with her hair going down over her shoulders, and here's her right arm. She's facing this direction. She's got on a dress or a blouse and skirt where it's kind of gathered in the middle. So sometimes you see the whole image, sometimes, and actually usually you'll see just the face, or the face with maybe a bit of the shoulders, because there's so many images in there. So that's enough about me and about Irigenics. Take a look at your beautiful peeps, because that's really why we're here. So Fatima, I set up your eyes as if you were looking at a photograph of yourself. So with your eyes looking back at you. So your nose would be in the center. This is your left eye, and this is your right. And you may remember I had a little bit of a mag light or a computer light off to the side, camera light over to the side. And I do that, excuse me, I do that for 2 reasons. One is so that you can identify that this is your left eye and this is your right, at least until you learn kind of which markings are which eye, because right now you're just used to looking in the mirror and seeing two brown eyes. But also I do that because by shining the light across from the side, it not only keeps me from blinding you, but it allows me to look at the contour, the layers of your eyes. There's 7 layers to the iris, to the colored structure, and this allows us to look down into those layers and look into that depth to see how long certain patterns have been around or certain gifts have been around in the family. So when I do an eye reading, one of the first things I'm looking at is what was here when you were very first born. If I had taken pictures of your eyes when you were just an infant, what would I have known about you? And one of the first things is this lovely, very dense, kind of velvety texture that's almost like suede leather. This is what's called the shaman's texture or the tribal texture. And this is where you come from, an origin of people where nonverbal communication was very, very important. Whether that was because they were out hunting as a group, and if one person saw the bear, they had to be able to go off and follow the bear, knowing that everyone else was turning with them, or whether this is because they were at sea for months at a time and they just had to know, I've got to get home. I've got to get home. The baby's sick and I got to take home baobab bark, where they just had this sort of telepathic aspect, not only to do synchronized movement, but really to think as one, where they could almost open up this channel and communicate with each other in a way that was just like picking up the phone, only it was completely nonverbal. So really a higher level of telepathy. And that ability stays with you today. And the way that'll show up is it can sometimes be kind of funny things, like you open your closet and you're like, what was I thinking when I bought that? I would never wear that. I don't wear plaid, right? That kind of thing where you're like, how did that get in here? And then you're like, oh, wait a minute, I bought that. Or you come home from the store and you bought groceries and you're like, what was I thinking? I don't eat these things. Somebody else supposed to put this in my cart, kind of thing. Well, sometimes that's the telepathy aspect. It's that real. It's that real that it feels like it's your own thought, only it's not. So it's really important for you to just kind of clear your head a few times a day and just, especially if you're shopping, just stop for a minute and be like, is this my thought? Am I in my space, or am I picking up somebody else's stuff? And just really to kind of do that as often as you can, just kind of dial in and double check. Is this mine? Am I having this thought, or have I picked something else up from somebody else? Now, the thing about that too, Fatima, is you have a fairly sunny disposition, right? Your outlook in the world is pretty sunny. So if you wake up and you're like, man, I am just in a mood and I don't know where this came from. Again, you may have picked it up from someone else. There could be a military action going on. There could be political stuff going on that none of us know about. You just have this ability to pick up elusive threats, right? To pick up this other information that the rest of us just aren't on that frequency with. And so, especially depressive thoughts or aggressive thoughts, you definitely want to just check in and be like, is this mine? And if the answer is no, it's not up to you to figure out whose it is. You send that home like a runaway child with love and blessings and peace and beauty and harmony and thanks for stopping by. But send it back, because you're hanging onto it only amplifies it. And it doesn't just amplify it. It doesn't belong to you. And it can be, it's where you really just want to cleanse your thoughts. You want to be cleansing those on a pretty regular basis and just checking in if you're picking up other people's stuff. I've worked with kids who are kind of in self-destructive and suicide patterns. And when you ask them, is that thought yours? They've just said, well, I'm worthless and nobody wants me. And you're like, is that yours? And they're like, what? What? And you're like, is that thought yours? That thought, I'm worthless, nobody wants me. Just ask yourself, is that mine? And they give you this weird look like you got 3 heads. And they're like, no, I don't know. The answer in my head is no. And they're really surprised. And they're like, what is that? And I'm like, this is what your structure is. You pick up other people's thoughts as if they were your own. So you got to be really careful who you're spending your time with, because if you're spending your time with people who are in dark places, you're going to be right there with them. So that was here when you first came into our world. Now that's actually your texture. That's not actually your structure. Your structure is where we see these fold lines and where we see these kind of small openings. This is what's known as the sensitive eye structure. And it just adds to that shaman and tribal texture. This means you're physically sensitive. So when you say to me, Amy, that doesn't feel right to me, you're talking about a physical feeling. When I say that doesn't feel right to me, I might be in my head, I might be in my heart, I might be in my intuition. I am everywhere except in my body, right? And so you have a different physical experience of the world than the rest of us. You might have 7 or 9 physical senses. Everybody's got 5, but you might have the ability to smell color, or associate a number or numeric value with a color or with a musical note. You've just got a different physical experience than the rest of us. And so staying in your body is key. Breathing, getting back in your body on a regular basis during the day is really key. These were all here when you first came into our world. The sensitives power up in stillness. And when I say that, that is like a mountain lion. That is where you crouch like a mountain lion. You sniff, you take in the information. Your tail twitches, your hair stands up on the back of your neck, and you're picking up information all before you move, right? So processing information is really your key. In sports, that would be archery, golf, darts, pool, any place where you can process the movement first, tai chi, yoga, and then move. That's where your powerhouse is. And that's when you're really in your body. And that's when you are really at your 110%. Now, one more thing that was here when you first came into our world is where we see these kind of crease lines or fold lines. Sometimes they look like scratch marks. These are the rings of achievement. If you took the Clifton Strengths Finder 2.0 skills assessment, it would say that achievement is one of your top skills. You're that person who gets the job done. You are amazing with a to-do list. Now, the thing to remember about that is a to-do list is kind of like an alarm clock. When you have to get up at 5 in the morning, you're like, oh gosh, I've got to get up at 5. I got to get up at 5. I got to get up at 5. I got to remember. I got to wake up at 5, right? It's like big energy. And then you set the alarm and you're like, okay, I'm going to sleep. And you can just sleep because you don't have to think about it anymore. It's the same thing when you use a to-do list. When you use that list, you can stop thinking about things and just experience, right? So the problem with this achievement ring is this tends to be, and a to-do list is typically one word. It's like a grocery list: gas, groceries, laundry. It's not I should get bananas. I ought to pick up oranges. I need to get milk. It is milk, bananas, oranges, right? It's just, there's no emotion. There's no guilt. You just do it. It's just done kind of thing. So the thing about this achievement list is it's a little bit guiltier. It's a little, I should get groceries. I should get groceries. Oh my gosh, I was going to get groceries. Why didn't I get the groceries? It's kind of, it can be a little bit overwhelming. It can be a little bit kind of beating yourself up. So you definitely want to put things onto that list. Use it like an alarm clock. Get them out of your head and onto paper so that you can be done with them, because they really just become kind of confetti in your mind, right? They're not, sometimes they get to a point where they're just not serving you if you're not using that to-do list, which is really where you lock and load. That's really where your gift is at, Fatima. Okay, so in the world of your ancestors, when we look at this right eye, we're looking at left brain critical thinking aspects, left brain hemisphere. So math, science, geometry, physics. This is where we're looking at identity, arbitrary control, where we're looking at masculine relationships, dads, brothers, sons, boyfriends, our own inner masculine. How do we command? How do we CEO? How do we act as an entrepreneur or a patriarchal loving member of the community? This is also where we'll find sibling rivalry with brothers, but it doesn't mean that we get brothers. It means that our ancestors had a challenge with a masculine competitive environment or with brothers. So those could also be brothers in arms, brothers in military, boarding school, orphanage, street kids. They're like peers, Peers. These are like brothers who are actually peers, right? But in our world, this can show up if we don't have a brother, or if we get along fine with our brothers. This can show up in board games, sports, legal issues, anything involving identity and ownership, like plagiarism, trademarks, patents, deeds, trusts, wills, estates, contract agreements, lease agreements, all those kinds of things that show up in this competitive masculine area. When it comes to the left eye, we're looking at the right brain aspects that are more creative: cooking and crafting, interpretive sports like gymnastics and ice skating. This is where you'll find feminine relationships: moms, girlfriends, sisters, daughters, our own inner feminine. Are we like Lady Gaga? Are we like Paris Hilton? Are we like Audrey Hepburn? What's our personal brand of feminine? Are we sporty? Are we cute? Are we sexy? Are we powerful? Are we playful? What is our female presence? This is also, how do we provide nurturing love, mothering love? How do we care for our brood? How do we gather everyone together and keep them safe? This is also, how do we provide sensual loving? This is also where we'll find religion, and the creative aspects, inspiration, intuition, healing abilities, creative writing, and music. This is where we'll find sibling rivalry with girls or sisters, or where we will find female competitive environments, whether that's nurses working with a charge nurse, or hairstylists fighting over who's got the hair dryer, or whether it's ice skating competition, choir, band, writing competition, artistic competitions, theater, any of those aspects. So if we had a great grandfather who was a great violinist and was on his way to his audition and somebody tripped him and he broke his violin and never played again, it would be here. Even though he's a guy, it would still be in the left eye in creative competition. Whereas plagiarism, if you wrote a song and somebody stole the song, that would be over here in ownership and identity in masculine competitive. So this is why you can't quite cut and paste an eye reading. You've got to kind of put it all together as you go. So from about 10 o'clock, it could be 10 o'clock, from about 10 o'clock over to 2 o'clock in your eyes, this is all about religious oppression. This is where everybody knows kings don't marry commoners, and everybody knows nice little girls don't wear red lipstick. Now, you have some fabulous images in here, even without magnifying them. We can see different images in your eyes, again, just like somebody drew with a number 2 pencil, and we wish they would have sharpened it. But I mean, like here, you can see this gal with the kind of 1940s hair and kind of a jacket. You've got this guy up here in a taller hat. You've got this person down here. But I'm going to go ahead and bring in a little bit of magnification, and we're going to go around your eyes and look at what's up with these images. So Fatima, my whole goal when I do this is to make this video into a tool for you going forward where you can connect with your ancestors anytime doing automatic writing or automatic drawing or dream journaling. And so you're going to find me circling images in here because you have thousands of images in here. You have a lot of images. Very tiny, but very detailed. Let's see if we can get this gal up in size. Do you see the woman here in the long dress with her arm up in the air? Kind of the women's suffrage time. She's got the heavy duty floral hat on. She's looking over her shoulder behind her, but she's got this long, slim dress on. We got a little boy here with like a cowboy hat on, kind of like he's playing Cowboys and Indians. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. It's so wrong, but I just said it. It was a game of the times, right? Sorry, I can't change the name from what it was. You've got all these images through here. So what happens is those images that represent either gifts or impacts of their time that relate to what we're looking at will show up in your eyes. And this gal here with her hair pulled up, she's got kind of ivory colored skin and kind of a greenish dress. She's looking over her left shoulder, and I would say she's got a little girl here with her. And that's kind of interesting because this is actually in altruism. So altruism is just outside of 12 o'clock. Altruism is where we give or do something that wasn't asked for. So the ultimate act of altruism is when we place a child for adoption, because the child will never know how we suffered for giving them up. But the child also didn't ask to be given away, and they usually resent it if they know about it, right? Once they figure it out, it's usually kind of a resentment spot. So this is altruism. If you've ever had to rehome a beloved pet, a cat or dog, that's an act of altruism. And that would tell us that your ancestors definitely had to give up a child for adoption. But with her right here, I would lean very heavily towards that. There's also a couple other reasons, because you've got markings in all these family positions. The direct run-in with the church, but in here is martyrism. Martyrism is where your ancestor said, I'll go, I'll do it, I'll take care of this. Now, when I say that, this could also have to do with this altruism aspect. There's a couple ways those two play together. One is you volunteer to do something, and then you're like, oh my gosh, why did I say I would do that? Why? What was I thinking? But also sometimes when a child was given up for adoption, it was because the family was having a fit. And whereas the person was like, I'll raise them by myself, I'll tell people the dad died or whatever the case is. But when the family's like, you have to give that child up, fine, I'll do it. I will hate you forever for doing it, but I'll do it. This is not being heard, not being listened to. Not shocking that this is here. So this is where your ancestors felt unheard. And typically this is regarding family. It can be regarding creative pursuits, but typically it's regarding family. But also it can be when they've given intuitive advice, like, I don't know what it is about that guy. Just don't go out with him. There's something about him that I think is wrong. He kind of creeps me out. And then they don't listen. and something goes really wrong. And it's like, why didn't they listen? Why couldn't they hear me? Right? And that marking's right here. So coming out of altruism is willpower. Willpower is where we speak our truth and we say, no, you're not going to tell me I have to give up my child. You're not going to tell me I can't marry this person, that, I can't marry the commoner, or I can't wear red lipstick. You're not going to tell me this. And this is where your ancestors kind of made a verbal stand, right? Rebellion is when something gets hurt or broke, right? Rebellion is where, how do I want to say this? Willpower is speaking out against abortion. Rebellion is burning down the abortion clinic, right? And so this is kind of where your ancestors were moving into a bit of rebellion. Like, okay, we're not being heard. We're not being listened to. We're just going to go and fight. But in fact, they learned to get into clever rebellion. Sometimes it makes more sense to go behind the lines. You can get more done by sneaking than you can by being really obvious and loud. And this is where you have ancestors who were sneaky. This is kind of, we call this the Mission Impossible, or the Hogan's Heroes kind of area of the eyes. This is where your ancestors learned to play a role or hide who they were in order to get their needs met. And they were pretty good at it, actually. This is where, next is where we're looking at the area of the matriarch, the mother. But this is a replacement mom. In our world, this is typically mom. But in our ancestors' time, this was a replacement mother. And this was, here's a woman from behind. She's got this big blousey sleeve. Here's her curly hair, and she's facing away from us. And this is kind of that curve on the back of her neck, on the back of her shoulders, right, with a lower dress facing up this way. And you've got this guy up here in a hat. This can be, the matriarch can be a teacher. It can be a coach. It can be the oldest sister. It can be an aunt or a grandmother. But this is that high-powered woman. So if we had ancestors who got read home to the farmer down the road, it could be the farmer's wife. But somewhere your ancestors had some challenge with the matriarch. Now, what's interesting about this, Fatima, is she's got her back to us. And what that means is it's someone unknown. Now, typically what this means is that somebody could come to you from 23andMe or Ancestry.com and say, we're related, but I can't find it. I can't find the paper trail. They're not going to. Either somebody was a foundling, or somebody ran away from home and changed their identity when they could, or somebody's father isn't who we think it is, or a records building burned to the ground. But when we see people that are turned away from us in our eyes, it means we have family out there, but there's no paper trail. You don't really need it anymore, because if the DNA matches, you may never know the mystery. You may never know how you got that DNA, but the bottom line is, if the DNA matches, then you found that person that you're actually related to. Here, I would say a mother with a child, either a couple of children, or an older girl and a little girl, and she's talking to someone here. It's amazing, because some of these images, remember I talked about these being drawn with a number 2 pencil, but that's just about like right out of a photograph. I mean, that is just like a sepia. Oops, that's not going to work. Let me do that again. That is just like out of a sepia photograph. I mean, it's so clean. That is such a clear image. Let me see if I can bring that up. I mean, it's just like out of a photo. Not even a photo negative. It's just like right out of a photo. And so many of your images are that way, which again, it's one of those amazing characteristics of a brown eye. The challenge is there's so many images in here that they're so super layered on each other that you're not getting a full image. You wish you could just pull this guy out of the crowd and get a look at him, which is, I guess, what I'm looking at here is like we're literally seeing her. Now, this is sibling rivalry with girls. And it can also be, sibling trauma. It doesn't necessarily have to be fighting. It can also be trauma, like if someone got sick or if someone was in an accident kind of thing. But it's really, again, this can be like siblings in an orphanage. It can be female competition, like nurses working with a charge nurse. It's there's all kinds of ways that this can show up, this sibling rivalry. And this can be that jealous, catty jealousy. How come Fatima gets this? How come Fatima gets that? Right? The one thing to keep in mind is that from about 4 o'clock over to 8 o'clock, this is what we call the performer's wedge. Anyone who shows up in here, they just thought they were the bomb. Whether they were a musician or an athlete, or just a kid who was kind of an adventurer, or the Red Hat Club ladies. They love to show up in this zone down here from about 4 to 8 o'clock. It just is one of those fascinating aspects. I think he's got a little toy airplane right there. You got the guy and the kid, and then there's like this airplane here. I've looked at this airplane a couple times now. I'm like, there's like an airplane there. And I've done eye readings enough that I should just know if it looks like a turtle, it's a turtle. So you got a kid with an airplane in there, kind of thing. Which would have to be in more recent times, obviously. So this is where there was a little bit of challenge with self-esteem. Now, what's interesting about this is you've got a man here with a very white beard mustache. You've got someone back here, someone here. So many of these are actually men. You come over here and there's a woman, and I would say a woman here, and a guy again here. So again, whether these self-esteem challenges have to do with family dynamics or religion or the arts, some sort of creative competition, nonetheless, there's still so many in here. I'm going to keep watching and see if I can see a clue as to why or where that's coming from. Let me take this back down in size again. So coming over here is a direct run-in with the church. Up here is everybody knows kings don't marry commoners. And here's where your ancestors had somebody get in their face and say, you're not marrying that person. You're not wearing that lipstick. You're not going to have that career. That's not women's work. That's not men's work. Somewhere that somebody kind of got into their face. And they had a little bit of trouble with self-reliance, feeling like they kind of had to do it themselves, feeling a little bit like they weren't supported. And this mark is one of my favorite marks in the eyes. This is Born to Become. Now, I notice it's in your left eye, but not your right. So what this is we call it the J.K. Rowling mark. This is where someone starts their life on one trajectory. And it's like everybody knows Fatima's going to grow up and she's going to, have kids, or she's going to have this career and she's going to do this and do this and do this. And that's who Fatima has always been. And that's what she's going to do. And then at one point, the trajectory changes. At some point or another, something happens and your life changes. So imagine J.K. Rowling. She's broke. She's like, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay my bills? What am I going to do? And then out of her head comes Harry Potter. And she just gets fixated on it. And she writes the books and becomes one of the wealthiest women in the world. Had she not been broke, that wouldn't be part of the story. And how she wound up writing Harry Potter instead of going down to get a job at Kmart will baffle most people who have not picked up and written that book, right? But that's Born to Become. That yellow brick road was laid at her feet always. The fact that it's in your left eye would tell us that we're looking at something that is either creative, intuitive, or in the healing arts, or that whatever it is isn't actually related to vocation. So when I say that, it's like being that 90-year-old lady dancing on Facebook. I didn't dance till I was 80 years old. And then I had a stroke and they told me I should dance. And everybody's like, wow, I wish I could move like her when I was 90 years old. So the thing about it is we don't see it coming and we don't get to see what it is. That's part of what makes it the story, right? Is it has to be this surprise and it comes out of nowhere kind of thing. Okay, let's look at your right eye. Here, when we're looking from about 10 o'clock over to about 2 o'clock, this is all about arbitrary control. This is landlord over tenant, banker over borrower. This is identity. And it's also because I said so. And you see, again, we're out here at just outside of 12 o'clock in altruism. And you've got these couple of girls who are, they're almost like orphan girls who are bathing. And I don't know why I say that. That's got to be an intuitive moment because you've got this dark-haired girl here, this blonde-haired girl here. She's got her arms out in front of her. She's got like an arm over her shoulder like she's washing her back or like she's scratching her back. There might even be a woman behind them talking to them. But they definitely have that orphan girl energy. The two of them do. Let me just see if I can quite capture them. Yeah, little girl. And the woman's got her head just kind of poked in between them. There's also another woman's face back here, like a more hidden face that's coming out when you take it in a smaller size. Yeah, I would lean really strongly. Fatima, I don't know if you've ever had to rehome a cat or dog, or if you know anyone in the family who was raised by an aunt or an oldest sister, or whatever the case is. But I would definitely lean towards somebody got displaced, somebody got moved from one part of the home to another. And again, you have so many images in here. Man, we could just spend days looking at all these people in here and where they're at and what they've got going on. Coming further out, again, this is really mighty close to rebellion. I mean, this is willpower, it's speaking out, but this is really on that line with actual kind of rebellion, and really clever rebellion, but kind of rebellion. So there was some aspect of rebellion that was a problem for your ancestors, whether it was because they were pushed into it when they didn't really want to be there, um, or whether it was more of like a PTSD. But usually when they're PTSDs, they show up down here, kind of out in this area out here is usually where we'll see PTSDs. But so this is maybe more a little bit of a force out, where they were sort of forced into a revolution or into fighting when they really didn't want to, or forced into this clever rebellion when they really wanted no part of it. They wanted to be peaceful people. And they really went into it, martyrism, I'll do it, I'll go, but really pushed into it when they really had no intention of ever getting involved in it. And knew from the beginning that they would always regret it, but they just had to do it, kind of thing. And that's how times were back in those days. This is where you really get an opportunity to put a ton of love on these ancestors who were before you, because they lived such challenging lives. And, when they went through their traumas, they were real traumas, right? I mean, oftentimes we have what are real traumas coming out of these, but rehoming a cat or dog compared to rehoming a child that you've birthed are kind of two different games. I mean, no question, there's tons and tons of emotion, etc., when you're dealing with giving up a beloved pet. But in their case, sometimes there were things that were really unintentional, like sending their children to America, planning to come right behind them, and then something goes wrong and they can't get to America. Or worse yet, they get to America and they can't find their child because something's gone wrong in immigration, somebody's name has changed, and they realize they're never going to find their children again. And then kind of trying to sort out what happened. Again, some challenge with not being listened to. Now, this is actually in the vocational eye. When this happens in the vocational eye, I'll tell people, when you choose a career, you either need to choose a career where you get the credentials, you become the anesthesiologist, you become the navigator, where you have a say over everyone, right? Where you are the expert and you have a say over everyone. Or you choose a career where credits don't matter, where it's like, we don't care where Michael Jordan learned to play basketball. We don't care where Ansel Adams learned how to take photographs. We don't care where our hairstylist went to hair school, so long as she gives us a good cut. Same thing with our intuitive reader. It doesn't really matter so much. Don't become a para anything. Don't become a paralegal, a para medic. Paramedic. I guess you could become a paramedic. That's kind of one of those expert areas. But don't become assistant manager of anything, because your intuition is so dialed in. Your gift for interpretation, for expression is so dialed in that you'll know that it's the appendix. And the doctor's over there saying it's gallbladder. And you're like, no, it's appendix. I'm telling you, my intuition's always right. And they're like, yeah, your intuition's always right. Whereas a doctor, nobody ever asks the doctor if they intuitively knew to take out the appendix. They can hide their intuition inside of their degrees, right? So just don't step into that subtitle, because it was a problem for your ancestors. So it will be a problem that comes up for you. Gift for expression, interpretation. This is where you create from a feeling, like sewing a dress that you want a woman to wear, where she feels playful or powerful or exciting or whatever the case is. But that ability to create from a feeling for a feeling. Great skill. One of the great either lost skills or overlooked skills in career assessment. That ability to customize and deliver. There's so many stories going on in here. It's almost like they're alive. Like you see two people dancing and like they're literally like dancing, like you've caught them in that moment, kind of thing. Again, this challenge with the church was kind of a big deal. Whether this was about, whether the church had a hand in that child having to be given up for adoption, or whether this is, about corruption, where, the ministers making a pass at you when he's married, and not you, this would be your ancestors, but some action that was kind of a direct run-in with the church. You pagan, you witch. Um, and again, images from behind. You've got a woman here. It's interesting because here again, you have a slim woman with bare arms. So that's not so common when we think about our ancestors' time, unless we're talking about burlesque or a brothel or um, a more recent ancestor, also possible. But again, you've got some from behind where we're looking at somebody being displaced, somebody's name not being who they actually are. And that gift for writing includes technical writing. This is how to, self-help, curriculum. This is contract writing and legal writing, business type writing, research, reports, that kind of thing. And yet your ancestors had a little bit of challenge over something they signed where they kind of regretted it. So if you've ever like signed a check and overdrawn your bank account, that would be an example. Or used a credit card and then later on realized wrong card because you had something on auto pay that now overdrew it. And you're like, oh no. Or if you bought something with a card and then 2 days later it went on super sale and you're like, why didn't I wait? Why did I buy that? It's something where it's like you see yourself signing that card over and over again. In your ancestors' time, it's where they saw themselves signing something over and over again, where it's like, why did I sign that? Why didn't I wait? And again, here coming into sibling rivalry with brothers or a masculine competitive environment. So again, doesn't mean that you had brothers, or if you have brothers, it doesn't mean that you don't get along or you haven't had a trauma. But this is where your ancestors had trouble with a masculine competitive environment. So legal, board games, competitive sports, games of strategy, hunting, going hunting together, those kinds of things. Let me take a look here. But some level of this masculine competition going on between them. This can even be where, the grandmother has like a favorite, right? Where grandma's kind of the matriarch of the family and she's got favorite grandchildren kind of thing. Like they can do no wrong. They're going to get their college education paid for and the rest of you are just stuck. So sorry, but mom and dad can't afford to put you through college and grandma doesn't like you kind of thing. This is a challenge with the patriarch figure. We would think of this as dad, but remember, in these times, the patriarch could have been the king or the nobleman or the landlord or even the pope. This is where Sheriff of Nottingham, right? There was a challenge with that patriarchal figure. And in your world, this will show up as, no matter what I do, it's not good enough for that man, right? Where you'll have this, again, it can be a coach or a teacher where it's just like, man, whatever I do, it's not working out. In that kind of masculine competitive scenario. Really beautiful eyes, Fatima. So many images and such a variety, from those who are really not affluent to those who are really kind of dialed up to those who you're thinking, wow, was that in a brothel? Was that a burlesque? What are we looking at there? Kind of thing. Just a great variety and such rich stories in there. So I'm excited to jump into your My iMag. It'll be about a week to 10 days when I start your mag, which will give you a little time to watch this video and then decide if there's something you want me to hone in on or spend more time with, that I can kind of do that for you. Wishing you and your ancestors every blessing in 2023 and beyond.